Yippee. Hi. Being the mother of a teenage boy, and my best friend is also the mother of a teenage boy, and we're hearing you look for the good in our children and focus on that, yet we're still manifesting in our house substances that we would prefer not to have, and we're trying not to push against it, not to resist or to say, no, we don't want that in our house and don't bring that into our house, but it's still coming in. What can we vibrate to make that feel better for us?
It's not an easy thing to be a parent in this time-space reality where you have these secular laws where you are held accountable that go crossways of the current of your soul, which demands freedom for all. In other words, we know it is a dilemma because the inner being of you wants to look at your children no matter what and find reasons to adore them and to amplify the parts of them that are most in alignment with who they really are in order to maybe be an influence or a catalyst to help them to find more alignment with who they are.
Yes.
The funny thing about these substances is that at the heart of the majority of the reason that most are using such substances is because they are discovering it easier to diffuse their focus and therefore achieve that sensation of alignment with who they really are. In other words, it is so well-meaning. It is a way that they disengage because it diffuses focus and affects them in a way that often they achieve a greater sensation of alignment than they do otherwise. And so if you could focus upon the well-meaning intent of it. Now, this is going to tax some resolve on the parts of all parents as you hear what we're about to say next, because what we've been talking about all day here today, if your son was in depression, we would counsel him into anger because we know that that would be the next best step for him. And yet most of the world would say, Abraham, surely that is inappropriate to encourage this young person into anger. And we say, but for his own sake, we know the relief that he finds in anger, and we would do it for him. And then much of the world says, but what about the rest of us? In other words, you encourage him into anger, would his anger not have a negative repercussion on the rest of us? And we say, he is our student. He is the one that we are trying to help find relief. And if you would like to sit in the chair, we'll coach you into anger too. Or into something that will give you relief. In other words, we're wanting each of you to find your relief. But do you hear the confusion here? What the world is saying is, I'm afraid that if you use those drugs, that you will do something inappropriate to society. And so I make this law about this drug, for the most part never having participated in the drug, for the most part not having any personal experience with it, and for all kinds of other motives that have to do with economics. And then I, as a society, make this law, and then I hold these parents to conforming to this law. And we say, you have to decide whether you are going to follow the guidance that comes forth from within you, or whether you're going to follow the fickle guidance that comes from some secular law that moves about to suit the whims of the politicians who are always responding to the economics globally.
I see.
And then you say, well, then I have to find a way to not get crossways of the law.
Yes.
And we say, well, everybody's doing that in some way. In other words, if you knew how many laws you break every day, you'd put yourself in jail. The only thing that saves you is you're not aware of them, so you don't realize. Esther ran through a stop sign, didn't even know she did it, and felt not any guilt about it because she didn't know she did it. And Jerry said, well, that was interesting. And Esther said, I'm guilt-free. I didn't even see it. What we are really wanting you to feel is that when you talk about someone else, we never want to talk to you about someone else. we want to counsel you about how you feel. Now, it could be about how you feel about someone else,
right.
but your only power is in about moving your own emotions. And so, what do you think the emotion is that you feel in this dilemma about there being a law and you being a parent and you being responsible and you're supposed to be maintaining the law in your household? What do you think the emotional set point is that you have about this?
A fear, I think. A fear of consequences for myself and financially, and as well as consequences for my son, but mostly for myself. All
right, we think that's an accurate description. So you're afraid of what might happen if people find out. No one will tell. And you're afraid of what consequences for your son? What is it about that frightens you?
I don't know. The sort of prevailing feeling about the use of these substances is that it removes a feeling of liveliness. It removes your feeling of desire. Takes away ambition or wanting to do or feel better about your life. That you just kind of lie around on a sofa and watch videos and chill out all the time, and that's
all right. Now we want to ask you something. So if you saw your son writhing in the discomfort of despair, really feeling discord about something, would you feel uncomfortable about seeing him find some way of soothing himself? This is really a big topic, friends. This is key to what we're talking about all day here today. Of course, we're not teaching you or encouraging you to take drugs to change the way you feel. We're encouraging you to move up the emotional scale. Yes. It's the same sort of thing. But don't you want relief for yourself or for someone that you love? In other words, can't you find somewhere within yourself an understanding of why someone might reach for something that does make them feel better?
Oh, yes. Yes.
And so, do you ever convey that? Or are you afraid to convey it because the relief that they are seeking is so inappropriate? In other words, aren't we talking about the same thing here today? Most counselors would not counsel you into anger. We see so many people who are in depression who automatically, in a self-surviving, knee-jerk, natural instinct, find their way to anger. And they're on their way up the emotional scale. And then they are counseled about the inappropriateness of their anger. And so they just bounce back and forth between depression and anger, depression and anger, depression and anger. It isn't until someone says, I deliberately chose this angry thought and I do feel better, and I'm wise to have chosen this angry thought, and I will keep reaching for something more, but I chose this deliberately, that any sense of power is regained. Can you feel that? In other words, in the moment that you acknowledge that I did this deliberately because I wanted to feel better, and you know what? I don't care what any of you say, I do feel better. That's when you regain your first step of power, and that's when the discord and the resistance begins to diminish, and then you're on your way. So what we are suggesting is that if someone steps into what they are calling and the relief of the drug, and we promise you it is a relief or they wouldn't keep going to it, if someone could help them say, good for you, you've chosen something that is temporarily causing you to feel better, and you did it deliberately, and now you have regained some of your power because you've shown yourself that there is a way out of the despair that you were feeling, or whatever the emotion is that you were feeling. Can you see that in the acknowledgement that they have done it on purpose, that there is a sort of regaining of some sort of control?
Yes.
Now, there is less control through the drug because now the drug is needed, and worse still, the drug is expensive, and worse still, the drug is hard to find. Well, not so hard to find, but worse still, the drug is illegal, and worse still, there are consequences about it. But what we are saying is, if you can look for some reason to shine the spotlight of your awareness that this person is regaining some power through this action, no matter what the action is, that regaining of that feeling of control of one's life is what everything is about. In other words, every single negative emotion that ever exists and every single negative experience that has ever lived is lived because someone felt powerless and they were waiting for circumstances that they couldn't control to change before they would feel better. There isn't anything that anybody wants, whether it's a material object, a relationship, a situation, an event. There isn't anything that anybody wants or has ever wanted that is for any other reason than they think they will feel better in the having of that. You see, in the same way that a counselor stands in defiance of someone's anger and says, oh, your anger is misplaced, you shouldn't be angry. Do you see that that gives that person nowhere to go? In other words, they felt disempowered, they found the first step out, and then they were discouraged from the freedom and the relief that they found. Now they have nowhere to go. And this is exactly what's happening with the drug movement. People are coming from despair into feelings of relief, and then society is trampling on them so hard with so many rules. And for the most part, especially the youngsters, they're not having much of you. Their personal experience is showing them that the drug is not making them feel the way the advertisements say that it is. They see athletes and masters in all fields utilizing the drug and excelling beyond anything that they ever did before. In other words, it's not computing. There's so much misinformation that is being offered by those who seek to control. And the drug rebellion is as much about seeking rebellion over the control as it is about wanting the substance for their own relief. In other words, some of them are finding the drugs just because they want to say, you can't control me. We want your son to say, society, you don't get to decide for me. I get to decide for me. And I will selectively break the laws that I choose to break, and I will vibrationally hold myself in alignment with well-being, and I will thrive no matter what kind of fits you throw around me. In other words, I'm guided from a broader perspective. I'm guided from the perspective of who I really am. I'm guided from a perspective of worthiness and well-being and love and upliftment and value to everyone with whom I interact. I watch for opportunities to empower, to uplift, to adore. I do so many things that are not on your books at all. And I worry not at all about your records and laws and rules that have been formulated from your disconnected point of view. Now some say, well, what kind of a world would it be if everybody did that? And we say, oh, such a good world. If you were tuned in, tapped in, turned on, and following your impulse, you would dance together, you would zig and zag together, you would co-create together, you would love together, you would excel together, you would uplift together, you would thrive together. But friends, you don't have to wait for the others to catch up. In other words, you don't have to wait for them. And we wouldn't run around mocking. We wouldn't run around with a plaque, I break laws. We would run around with an attitude that says, well-being follows me everywhere I go, and I'm inspired to the action that is of greatest advantage to me, and therefore I am always of greatest advantage to anyone with whom I interact. I don't use these laws or these rules to push against, so I don't use them as my excuse to not connect with source energy. And so since I'm always fully connected to source energy, now I'm the greatest value of anyone that I'm interacting with, you see.
Yes.
No one connected to source energy would ever harm another. And it's an interesting thing. More injustices and more discomfort and more unhappiness is projected at others under the name of righteousness and under the name of law-abiding and under the name of law, under the name of religion, than all other things put together. In other words, don't worry about it. What do you say to a child? You say, you have within you guidance that is there, and whatever it takes for you to hear that, I'm rooting for it. And when you were first born, I saw it as my responsibility to guide you. And I tried, but I see that you have your own path, and that my trying to guide you is stepping all over your creative toes. And somewhere along the path, I've discovered that it's my job to guide me, and it's your job to guide you. And so I see it as my job to see you as thriving, because when you are thriving, then you are in alignment with your guidance. And then use every opportunity that you can find to express your awareness that they are in their own guidance.